Across the African continent, witchcraft was feared, revered, and punished. In villages and kingdoms stretching from the deserts of the Sahara to the forests of the Congo, magic was not a myth. It was a living force, a force that could heal or destroy, protect or curse. It was a source of wisdom and a reason for terror. For in Africa, witchcraft was never a single story. It was 1,000 stories of spirits and ancestors, of healers and sorcerers, of justice and vengeance. This is the forbidden history of African witchcraft, where the line between faith and fear is razor thin, and the shadows still whisper the names of powers long forgotten. But to understand these forbidden legends, we must first step into the African worldview, a world where the boundaries between the living and the dead are not so clearly defined. Unseen were never truly separate. For countless generations, African life was shaped by spirituality. The ancestors were not gone. They were present, guiding, protecting, and sometimes punishing their descendants. Spirits dwelled in rivers, in forests, in mountains, in the winds themselves. The visible and invisible were woven together, like threads in a single cloth. Within this worldview, witchcraft was not an outsider superstition. It was part of life itself, a force both revered and feared, because it could take two very different forms. On one side, there was magic for healing. This was protective, communal, a lifeline for the people. Shamans, diviners, and healers used herbs, chants, and rituals to cure illness, bless harvests, protect children, and call upon ancestors for guidance. To the community, this form of witchcraft was sacred, a bridge to health, safety, and order. But there was another side, the side that dealt in harm and sorcery. Here, witchcraft became a weapon, a tool of envy, vengeance, and destruction. A curse could wither crops, spread sickness, bring death to a rival, or torment an entire family. Those who practiced such magic were not healers, but feared sorcerers, shadowy figures who drew upon the unseen to cause ruin. This dual nature is why witchcraft in Africa stood at the crossroads of reverence and terror. It was the hand that could bless or strike down. It was life and death, hope and despair, bound together in a single, mysterious force. And in this balance between protection and destruction lay the power that made witchcraft both indispensable and forbidden. Yet, for all the fear surrounding witchcraft, it was also seen as a gift, a force that could heal, guide, and protect. And at the center of this sacred power stood the healers, the shamans, the medicine men, the diviners. In different lands, they carried different names. The Sangomas of southern Africa, the Ngangas of Central Africa, the herbalists and spirit workers of the West. But their purpose was the same, to serve as intermediaries between the living and the spirit world. These healers were more than physicians. They were counselors, guardians, and interpreters of the unseen. When illness struck, when crops failed, when a child was born under troubling omens, it was to the healer that the people turned. With rituals, chants, and offerings, they sought answers from the ancestors and spirits, drawing on wisdom passed down through generations. The tools of their craft were as varied as the lands they came from. Herbs and roots carefully prepared into medicines that treated both body and soul. Divination rituals using bones, shells, or sacred carvings to glimpse hidden truths and reveal the causes of misfortune. Protective charms and amulets carried to ward off evil spirits, accidents, or curses. and ritual ceremonies where music, dance, and drumming could call forth ancestral presence and restore harmony between the seen and unseen worlds. But their role was not only practical, it was deeply spiritual. The healers stood as a bridge. Through them, the ancestors spoke, offering guidance to the living. Through them, the balance between health and sickness, fortune and misfortune, could be restored. Because of this, healers were respected figures in their communities. To harm a healer was unthinkable. To honor them was essential. Their wisdom was sought by rulers and villagers alike, for their words carried the weight of the spirit world itself. In many places, their authority rivaled that of chiefs or kings. To the people, they were not simply practitioners of witchcraft. They were the guardians of harmony, the ones who ensured that life remained in balance, that unseen forces did not overwhelm the fragile human world. In them, witchcraft revealed its brightest face, not destruction, but healing, not fear, but protection. But if the healer was the light of witchcraft, there was also a shadow. For just as magic could heal, it could also destroy. This was the realm of the sorcerer, the one who turned witchcraft into a weapon. Through hexes, curses, and secret rituals, the sorcerer could bring ruin upon rivals and enemies. To be named in such a curse was to live in constant fear, for no lock, no weapon, no wall could guard against the unseen. In villages across Africa, witches were believed to be the cause of sickness that no medicine could cure. A child struck by sudden fever, a harvest that rotted in the fields, a marriage that bore no children. All these could be signs of witchcraft at work. And so, the witch was feared not just as a threat to individuals, but as a danger to the survival of the entire community. Some believed that sorcerers could even summon spirits or demons to do their bidding. These spirits might be sent to torment victims in their sleep, to drain their strength, or to whisper madness into their minds. Nightmares, infertility, famine, all were laid at the feet of witchcraft. Where the healer stood at the center of the community, the sorcerer was cast into its shadows, whispered about, hunted, and hated. And yet, the line between healer and sorcerer was not always clear, for the same power that healed could also harm, and the difference often depended not on the ritual itself, but on the intent behind it. This is why witchcraft, in all its forms, inspired such awe and such terror. It could bless life, but it could also end it. And when terror took hold, justice was demanded. Across Africa, accusations of witchcraft carried deadly consequences. To be accused was to stand on the edge of survival, for few communities could risk harboring one believed to wield dark powers. Communal trials often determined the fate of the accused. In some places, ordeals were set, drinking a potion, plunging a hand into boiling water, or surviving a dangerous test. If one lived, they were declared innocent. If not, their guilt was considered proven. Punishments varied from exile, cast out from family and village, to execution, sometimes carried out in public as both justice and warning. The fear of witches was so great that entire communities would rise up against the accused, believing that the safety of all depended on removing the threat. Though these trials may remind us of the witch hunts of Europe, their roots were deeply African, shaped by local traditions and beliefs. Where Europeans often saw witchcraft as a pact with the devil, Africans saw it as a force disrupting the delicate balance between the living, the spirits, and the ancestors. To restore harmony, the witch had to be confronted. In this way, witchcraft was not merely a personal crime, but a communal danger. To be accused was to carry the weight of the community's fear, and to punish the accused was, in their eyes, to heal the very fabric of life itself. But witchcraft in Africa was never a single story. Each region, each people carried its own legends, its own spirits, its own fears and rituals. Together, they formed a vast and varied tapestry of belief. In West Africa, witchcraft was woven deeply into daily life. Here, many believed in witch spirits, beings who could inhabit the body and use it to harm others. The roots of voodoo trace back to this region, especially among the Fon and Yu peoples. Yet even here, the dual role of magic was clear. On one side, rituals for protection, fertility, and healing. On the other, spells for vengeance and destruction. Voodoo was not born as evil. It was a system of balance where the same spirits could bless or curse depending on the will of the practitioner. In Central Africa, fears centered on secret witch societies, said to gather in the night. These groups were believed to cause famine, sickness, and death through collective sorcery. The most chilling belief was in the phenomenon of child witches. When misfortune struck, accusations sometimes fell on the most vulnerable. Children blamed for bringing curses upon their families or villages. To be branded a child witch was to be cast into terror, a tragedy that still echoes into modern times. In southern Africa, the unseen world was filled with both healers and horrors. Among the most feared beings was the Tokoloshe, a malevolent spirit said to torment people in their sleep, often causing illness or even death. Protective charms and rituals were used to keep it away, while sangomas, spiritual healers, acted as the first line of defense, diagnosing spiritual causes of misfortune and prescribing remedies. The people lived with both faith and fear, trusting the healers, yet always wary of the shadows. And in North Africa, witchcraft carried a far older lineage. Here, traces of ancient Egyptian magic blended with later folk traditions and the rise of Islamic mysticism. Amulets inscribed with Quranic verses, protective spells against the evil eye, and whispered incantations show the fusion of ancient and new. The sorcery of the Nile lived on, transformed, but not erased, in the practices of desert tribes and city dwellers alike. From the forests of the Congo to the sands of the Sahara, witchcraft in Africa wore many faces: healer, destroyer, protector, punisher. Always different, yet always the same. A force of mystery that no one could ignore. But when outsiders came, when European colonizers set foot on African soil, witchcraft was seen through foreign eyes. To missionaries and colonizers, these ancient traditions were not sacred. They were paganism, idolatry, even devil worship. Rituals that for centuries had bound communities together were condemned as evil, and those who practiced them were branded as servants of darkness. The colonial powers sought to suppress witchcraft. Laws were written to criminalize its practice. Trials were outlawed. Healers were persecuted. Yet witchcraft did not vanish. Instead, it went underground. The chants and charms, the divination rituals, the protective amulets, they survived in whispers and secrecy, carried on behind closed doors and hidden fires. But something else happened as well. African traditions began to fuse with the religions brought by colonizers. Christianity and Islam mingled with older practices, creating new forms of worship. A healer might call on both the ancestors and the saints. A protective charm might carry the words of the Quran alongside traditional symbols. This blending of old and new gave birth to syncretic faiths that still thrive today. Colonialism tried to silence witchcraft, but instead it reshaped it, driving it into new forms, giving it new disguises, and spreading its influence far beyond Africa's shores. And so we return to the present. For though centuries have passed, the story of witchcraft in Africa is not finished. Even today, witchcraft remains a living force, feared in villages where accusations can still spark violence. In some regions, politicians are rumored to seek the aid of sorcerers before elections, believing that unseen powers can sway fortune as surely as armies or gold. Modern witch hunts still occur, tragically echoing the past. Those accused, often the elderly, women, or children, may be cast out or killed as fear drives communities to seek safety through punishment. The same terror that haunted the ancestors still lingers in the present. And yet, witchcraft has also traveled far beyond Africa. In the diaspora of slavery, the traditions crossed oceans and planted new roots. In Haiti, they gave rise to voodoo. In the American South, to hoodoo. In the Caribbean and Latin America, to Santeria and other syncretic faiths. These practices fused African magic with Christian saints, with Catholic ritual, with local folklore, creating new traditions that still echo the rhythms of the old continent. The legacy of African witchcraft is one of survival, suppressed but never destroyed, feared yet always sought after. It lives in the sacred and the secret, in the healer's hut and the whispered curse, in the drumbeat that still calls spirits across time. For in Africa and across the world, witchcraft remains what it has always been, a forbidden power that both binds and terrifies, blesses and curses, heals and haunts. Witchcraft in Africa was never just magic. It was the reflection of human hopes and fears. It was medicine and malice, healing and harm, faith and fear entwined into one. And though centuries have passed, though empires have fallen, and new faiths have risen, though whispers of African witchcraft remain, they live on in rituals still practiced today, in the stories carried across oceans, in the shadows of every fire-lit village. For the forbidden legends of Africa are not gone. They wait, as they always have, at the edge of light, in the place where belief and fear become one.